good evening and good morning, depending on when you're watching this. So, one of the common things that we see with veterans that are in transition is that there's a great deal of interest in joining the tech career field or getting into the tech industry. So, what Nicole and I are going to be talking about is really what does that transition look like? How do you learn more information? How do you understand the industry, and then how do you make that transition and then be successful afterwards? So we're going to be talking about these particular things. We're going to talk about what is tech. You hear this all the time. Everybody has a different definition. So we're going to kind of clarify and scope it for the sake of this particular discussion. We're also going to talk about what are the roles. Typically, people think of technology as being real specific to some sort of STEM background, but there's actually a lot more there, and there's a lot of opportunities outside of just having a direct STEM background. Next, kind of what do those roles consist of? Are there qualifications? What is the expectations? Really, how do you get into the role? And then more importantly, how do you stay in the role and be successful afterwards? And then lastly, we're going to talk about making that transition. So if you're coming from a non-technical or military background, how do you transition into as well as keep moving forward after you've entered the tech industry? And so this is primarily focused on veterans with non-technical backgrounds, but it's okay if you have a technical background. That just makes the transition a little bit easier. And again, this is a conversation, so at any time, feel free to raise your hand or just chime in with questions or comments. So the first question, the big question is, what is tech? What is technology? So traditionally, when we think of technology, we think of the things that I've just pictured right here: robotics, artificial intelligence, or the next Skynet, autonomous vehicles, a lot of software-focused industries. But technology is actually it's pretty much in every industry, whether we're talking about chemical engineering, whether we're talking about medical device development, whether we're talking about manufacturing, or food and agricultural research, as well as a ton of others, aviation, you just name it. So the important part here is if you're interested in doing a career where you're in the process of making things, pushing that edge, kind of expanding on what we can do as a society, you're not just limited into computer coding and software development. It's everywhere. Now, for the sake of this conversation, we're going to talk specifically about digital and computer science related industries. But a lot of the things that we're going to talk about here can actually be applied in technology in almost any industry out there. Next, I'll pass it over to Nicole to talk about roles.
Awesome. So as we kind of see, there's so much out there when it comes to technology and IT. And one of the things that I've noticed over the past few years, a lot of companies are switching. Instead of being known as we're healthcare forward organization, they're actually kind of rebranding as more of a technology driven or a technology forward company. So as we kind of dive into, we categorize two different types of positions. This is more so, I think, an important call out where you don't necessarily have to be the person that's hands-on keys to be in tech. So moving into the two specific ways that we broke this down. And this is, I think, just an important piece, knowing that you can really go through like being in tech in multiple parts of the business: IT, marketing, finance, sales, HR. So tech jobs can categorize in a lot of different aspects. So on the technical side of the house, this is where you might think of more of a traditional engineer, developer, tester, analyst. These types of roles, again, are probably going to be more so within a CTO organization or a chief technology officer, and probably working most directly with the software or the platform or the products. Now, on the flip side, you can have more tech adjacent or techno-functional roles. So these individuals, again, might not be doing the actual reading and writing of code on a day-to-day, but they're influencing the technology or IT initiatives. So looking at a product manager or a project manager. Again, not day to day in the weeds, but helping to influence and strategize the features or how those products are being consumed by the end users. Another, I think, an important call out, there are individuals that specialize in being technical writers or technical trainers, so that when a company is ready to launch a new product or help to share how to use a new system, individuals that are non-technical can actually take that technical jargon, figure out how to put those into manuals and procedures and processes, and then train non-technical users on how to use that system or product. I think another piece to highlight here, recruiters like myself. So I'm in a techno-functional kind of role. Again, I am not sitting and writing hundreds of lines of code each day, but working with technical individuals and understanding how technology initiatives are functioning and how resource and kind of workforce management plays into that. So there's a lot of different aspects and a lot of different roles. So before we dive into how you figure out what's right for you, I'll take a quick pause here and see if there are any questions. Awesome. So moving into kind of figuring out where do I go from here? So we kind of talked about how every company is becoming a technology-driven company. That last slide had 20 different types of roles, and that doesn't even capture all of the different options out there. So moving forward, we really want to focus on how do you align your skills, your passions, and your motivators to that next step. So first, I think a really important component is figuring out what's the right role, what's the right day-to-day or job function. And I know we're all really big fans of the 20-minute networking meeting. So Mike and I wanted to highlight some questions that you can ask individuals that are in some of those roles that we just walked through to best understand how do you align. So figuring out, what type of technical expertise is required, if it's more of a technical or more of that tech adjacent or techno-functional position, the typical background of someone that's joined the organization in that role. And one of my personal favorites is the third one here. I find that folks don't necessarily love talking about themselves. So if you can kind of trick them by talking about their peers or maybe individuals that are on their team, you get maybe a more direct answer. So asking someone, hey, what are the top 2 qualities for a product owner on your team? What are they bringing to the table that really help them stand out? And those are different strengths that you can either kind of check to see, okay, do I possess those qualities? Or it can directly inform maybe some gaps in your skill set or ways that you need to, upskill and level up or highlight more in your resume or LinkedIn profile or in an interview answer. So once you've identified the actual role, I think it's really important to more so think of what's that long-term fit. I don't mean to sound cheesy when I say, we don't necessarily want to find a job, but we want to find that long-term career. So understanding and setting expectations with yourself of what's that right fit. So a few, again, kind of going off of the same piece of using the 20-minute networking meeting, having some different questions that you can ask leaders in an organization or maybe managers over teams of engineers or data analysts. And some of them are more cultural based, kind of understanding where this fits into the larger organization. But one of my personal favorites and one I definitely encourage folks to ask and reflect on is the first one here. How does my day-to-day impact a customer? And I think this is really important to understand and kind of internalize, just knowing that, you could spend 8 hours a day, pounding out hundreds of lines of code, but what does that actually do in the long run? Is it affecting the bottom line of a company? Sure, but what's the larger overarching vision? Are there aspects of understanding I'm building a better UI and a better portal that's going to improve a patient care experience? Or am I creating Maybe it's specifically launching new products that are going to create seamless communications across multiple business segments with a new system. So really understanding not only what that immediate day-to-day or job function is, but how are you going to transition and make it that long-term career path?
And I want to add something else here, because a lot of veterans, we tend to think in terms of what is the mission, and that's what brings out a lot of passion. So that's another thing to talk about when you're having these interviews, is understanding what is that company mission, how is it affecting people, and Nicole has it, how does my day-to-day impact a customer, but also how does the overall mission and the vision of a company affect the customer, as well as kind of what is the internal culture itself. So these are the kind of things that can help you frame what your role is in relationship to the company, as well as in relationship to the people whose products and services it affects. Okay. So then the next thing is, okay, so you've had a chance to understand the roles a little bit better. You've done some research. You're understanding the company itself as far as that long term. So how do you either transition into the roles, or how do you continue to transition once you enter those roles? So G.I. Joe said it best: knowing is half the battle. And I would argue that in the tech world, knowing is more than half the battle. So really, it's all about leveling up by learning as well as staying connected with people. One of the big mistakes that people make, when, especially veterans, when they land their first job, is that they quit networking and they stop reaching out outside of the company, and they go very insular until you find yourself in a situation where you need, to network again because of some change of job. One of the reasons why networking is so important is that it continues to help you develop an understanding of the overall market, the overall industry, as well as building up relationships. Also, of that mentoring that you get out of networking is critical in helping you kind of understand, where do I go from here? You may have a game plan when you join your first company, but you are only understanding a certain portion of what the industry has to offer, as well as kind of where you fit in. So that could radically change, and you need a sounding board as you go through this process on what to do next, where to go as next as a career. On top of that, there's a lot of professional development and technical development. So we've listed 5 on this. I'll kind of walk through some of these. Online learning platforms, things like Udacity, LinkedIn Learning. There's a whole host of learning opportunities that you can go do. Several of these resources are no to low cost options. Many times your company will also have a training budget. So take a look at that and say, I would like to use this training budget to learn and to upskill on certain areas. Certification programs, they help you get in the door, as well as they keep you fresh on the latest things that are going on within an industry. So especially say software. Software is constantly changing, whether we're talking about data, whether we're talking about coding, whether we're talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. All these things are constantly changing. And things like the online learning, as well as the certifications programs, help keep you fresh, as does the professional associations. So we talked about that networking earlier, and how important it is for you on a personal basis. On a professional basis, these associations help keep you connected within a certain community of interest that is relevant. Also, if you're interested in communities of interest kind of adjacent to that, these are good connections to make. That kind of goes on to the next bullet, which talks about like Tech Minnesota, meetups. There's lots of other organizations too. Eagle Group is one of these types of organizations. But if we're specifically talking kind of about your career field, then there's a whole host of them. I actually start with meetups just because it's easy to search through. If I'm interested in something, if I'm interested in Google platform development, there's a meetup for that locally here. If I'm interested in project management, there's a meetup for that. So it's a really great place to start and making connections, and you can kind of expand on it from there. The next one is YouTube. So you don't think of YouTube as necessarily as this great education platform, but it actually really is. for example, my first job, I was working on tire development. I had not done tire development when I was in the Army. So you can bet that I was on YouTube watching all sorts of classes and all sorts of videos on tire development to learn more about my customers. The other thing is what YouTube is really handy in terms of customer research, because you can kind of see what your customers are emphasizing on some of their promotions and marketing videos, as well as the things they're sharing. The last one on there, we don't have it listed, but things like conferences are also great events. Whether it's in person, whether it's virtual, all of these forums are really, really powerful ways to kind of learn and continue to grow. Does anybody else kind of have experiences, things that they found very, very useful to help them continue growing?
I just heard about Skillshare. I don't know if that's actually worthwhile to pursue yet, but I've just become aware of it recently.
I'm not real familiar with, is that the same as Skill Bridge, or is this something else, Alan?
No, yeah, it's something different. It's more like it's more kind of like Udemy without the U, I guess. It's more focused on specific skills and competencies.
Ah, very nice. Yeah, so there's lots of options. If you're transitioning, there's several different options as well. We didn't talk kind of about the pre-transition prep, but understanding any certification requirements or education requirements can allow you to do that training while you're still in the service. So that's another good way to kind of prepare for a transition. Okay, so there's a couple key takeaways that we want to share, as we conclude this presentation. The first is tech is everywhere. So don't just limit yourself to things like software development. If that is what interests you, by all means pursue it. If creating software and being a part of that development process, is interesting, there's plenty of options, but you don't have to limit yourself. So some people, like a coworker I had, was just super interested in materials and material development, and I was interested in software. We made a great team when it came to developing products that the customers had to put on and physically manipulate, as well as the software that goes with it. But there's lots and lots of avenues. So as far as finding out more, just talk to people about that, and there's plenty of ways to learn more. Technical and non-technical roles. There's both out there. So even if you don't have a technical background, that does not limit you. And in fact, you might have a technical background and want to transition, and that's okay too. We talked about that networking and understanding that both the role and where you fit in and that bigger picture. And that will help you decide, what do I want to do? What do I need to get into that door? And then what do I need to do to continue to grow? And lastly, on that growing field, really that lifelong learning is a critical piece to continuing to develop and grow professionally, as well as expand your own network for a whole host of reasons. So at this point, we're going to open up, I think we're going to wrap up the recording and then open to questions.